Welcome everyone to this month's UPAA Live. Today we have with us Nate Edwards, and today's thing we're going to do is Stump the Nate. We've asked people to drop some raw files into a folder. We're going to give them to Nate, and we're going to have him take them through Camera RAW and see if we can stump him on how he would edit these photos.
Going on, guys? First off, I will say by no means am I the authority on how to edit photos correctly. You guys know there's a million ways to do everything in Photoshop, Camera Raw. And so my intent is not to say this is the way you need to do things because I don't feel that way at all. Hopefully just kind of going through how I would look at images, approach toning them, editing them, and answer any questions along the way, talk about different features in Camera Raw. And yeah, we'll go from there. So yeah, please feel free to just jump in, ask any questions. So we had a few submissions of photos that I'm just going to kind of walk through. So I did not open up any of these and try pre-edits to know what I was going to do. So we're just going to jump right in and kind of talk about different principles of editing. And again, even if you have like a better way, excuse me, or a different way of doing something, feel free to jump in as well. I'd love to hear. I love learning new things about post-processing and making things more efficient and better. So feel free to let me know. So I'm just going to select all of these and open them. All right. So here's all the images. So stage lighting, super hot on the person speaking, dark crowd. This is one where I'm sure you want to equalize that, right? So you can see the crowd and the person on stage. Campus photo, outdoor, indoor, shot in the rain. Regular portrait, transition lenses, studio shot. Have another campus shot. Molly the cow, I like that. So a lot of campus shots, national championship team. And then I assume, Jason, this is the career fair you were talking about. So that's kind of what we're going through. So if there's lovely group photo, 5 different color temperatures of light, and if anybody has kind of seen me do post-processing before, I kind of have a lot of my just regular go-to things that I do, and I make adjustments from there. One thing, well, I'm just going to go into it. So I'm going to bring my exposure up to kind of bring up the people in the shadows a little bit. Now, obviously, that's overexposing. All right, so I'm bringing up my exposure. I'm dropping those highlights to kind of preserve where it would be blown out. Throwing in some contrast here. I don't know if I'm going to do shadows much. This is the tricky part. So color. I mean, the way that this is shot, it is what it is. We're not going to really be able to equalize that the white balance for all the different color temperatures going on here. You have the blue light. You got like these, I don't know, tungsten lights coming down. You probably have another color light back here. You got, I always ask our students, what do you want me to see? And then like, what are you taking a picture of? What do you want me to see? And then point that out and be like, okay, well, outside of that, is there anything that is distracting from what you want me to see? And then we'll look around the image and talk about, well, what are some distracting elements? And then with those distractions, is there a way to minimize or eliminate those distractions? And so we'll talk about that probably with almost all the images. So in here, this lone lady over here, I don't think she's supposed to be in the shot, and she's kind of distracting standing there. So I'm just going to take her out. So you can minimize or eliminate those distractions. One of the ways you can do that is just through a simple crop. It's a little Dutch. I might straighten it just a little bit. No, maybe not. I think it feels better over there. Okay, I'm gonna hit K for my adjustment brush, or you can just go over here, your adjustment brush. And I have my exposure on 0.6, just over a half stop. And I'm just gonna brighten them up a little bit. You could even warm them up to match a little bit, just to brighten the people in front. I assume they're important. They're front and center. I'm not really sure context of this. Okay, because this is shot at 5,000 ISO, I am going to do some noise reduction. Now I have, and some of you guys have already heard me, you have already heard me talk about adaptive ISO. I'm not going to go through the example of doing this, but I'm going to explain it really quick because this is unbelievable and it will save you a ton of time. So Camera Raw has something that's called adaptive ISO that you can set as a preset when you open your images. And basically what you do is you'll take, you can take as many images as you want, but I did 2 images. One image shot at 400 ISO and one image shot at 10,000 ISO. And basically what I do is I create an action or a preset, I should say. I create a preset that I'm telling Camera Raw when an image is 400 ISO or less, I want you to do no noise reduction. When an image is 400 and higher, up to 10,000, I want you to do noise reduction, and it will automatically slide this luminance slider for the manual noise reduction based off of where your ISO fits along those lines. I'll kind of show you briefly how to do it, but look it up. It's pretty cool. So if you just create a preset, like you have those 2 images, it doesn't matter what the image is, the ISO is what matters. You just create a new preset, and then you will click. You have to select both images, or you can do 5 images or however many. Create ISO adaptive preset. You'll click that here, and you'll uncheck the rest. And then I just named it adaptive ISO. And then you'll go up here to the little cog. And where is it? Defaults. I will create a global preset adaptive ISO, override global settings. So you can do it actually for camera. It can be camera specific. So I have one for an R5, an R3, a 1DX Mark III. I need to create one for R1 and R5 Mark II because different cameras handle ISO differently. And especially if it's a newer camera, it'll probably do better, or yeah, it's relative on the camera. So you set this as a default. So every single time I open up images in Camera Raw, my adaptive ISO will set my noise reduction automatically. So I never have to touch it again, which makes it super, super nice. Like especially shooting a football game. During the day, I'm starting out shooting at 100 ISO. The sun sets, and I have a range of images shot from 100 to 10,000 ISO. And trying to go through and do manual noise reduction for all of them is a pain in the butt. And I don't want to spend that much time on it. And so it will just automatically do it for me. So I highly recommend you do that. It works awesome. And this is one of those images, I don't even have to worry about my noise reduction because it already does it for me. So there is now your AI denoise. I think this is what the AI denoise. It used to create a new DNG file with it, but it doesn't do that anymore. And so it just does it in your raw file. And so there, you can do, let me see, with it on and off. So it does pretty good. So, and you can see it takes off my luminance that I did. It
I
actually
was
does a really good job.
I was playing with this the other day and was trying to do a batch. It does take still like the 10 seconds to 20 seconds per image, depending on your machine, to
Hmm.
apply that. But then I found even afterwards, when I was still working within that batch of
Yeah.
images, that it was slow to go to the next image, upload on the screen. So it kind of made my machine chug down a little bit. So I'd say one of those things, if you were to do it in a batch, that you do it towards the end after you've done all your color adjustments and everything else, because then it will slow down all your other editing processes.
That's a good point. Thanks, Aaron. And again, like Aaron's doing, if you guys have any other thoughts or tips or more experience with some of these, go ahead and jump in. All right, you can see the difference like with the like before and then after just with the manual. Sometimes you'll get a lot of digital noise in your shadows, like different color of digital noise. This one doesn't show too much. I mean, you can kind of see it if you turn it down there. You get all the different colors in there. And that's where this color slider comes in. It will kind of normalize those colors. So, I mean, beyond this, for what the people would be using it for, I don't know if I would do much with this beyond that. All right. So for this, one of the things I'm first looking at right here is chromatic aberration. And so you can see like the magentas and the turquoise that are glowing on the tree branches. One of the things you want to make sure to do, that usually happens, it depends on your lens, but a lot of times it's mostly when um, things are backlit, where this happens the most. A lot of tree branches, well, anytime anything's backlit, a lot of times this happens. And the cheaper the glass, the more this is apparent. But one thing that you can do in here is, where is it? Detail or optics? I think it's optics. So right now I have remove chromatic aberration and it doesn't really do too much. So then I'll go down to the defringe and I'm going to turn my green up a little bit. And then you can pick the range of the color of that in here. And you see as I slide it to the right, you'll see it slowly disappear. And so you can really fine tune that range, or you can really expand it. The problem is if you expand it too much, it may affect different other parts of your image that you're unintending it to. And I'm going to do the purple a little bit, just get rid of there. And then you can see kind of the difference with it on and off. All right, I'm going to add contrast. I'm going to see if there's much in that sky there. Bring up my shadows. Maybe bring up my exposure a little bit. Color looks pretty good. Straighten it slightly. If you are on your crop, or even if you're not, you can hit A, and that will allow you to draw like your straight lines. If you want to take a line and go off that, or like a horizon, just kind of a shortcut there. Just hit the letter A. Effects, I'm gonna vignette in just a little bit. So with vignetting, you have to be careful, right? You don't want to go so extreme that people are like, that's a super heavy vignette. So I'm just gonna do it a little bit. I'm gonna bring my midpoint in, I'm gonna feather it. Well, I'm gonna do the opposite, just so you guys can see what the vignette is like doing. So your midpoint, right, it just brings it in and out. Your roundness, you can change the shape of that vignette. And then your feather just really softens it. So you want to be really subtle in all of your editing. You don't want to be heavy-handed. But your key is you want people to look, and we'll probably go over this in one of the other images. But our job is a photographer, and when we're doing post-processing, our job is to direct people to look where we want them to look without them realizing that's what we're doing. If they realize that's what we're doing, then we're not doing our job right, because then our post-processing is becoming distracting from what we want people to see. And so it has to be really subtle, done in a way that it directs the eye, but not so much that people know that's what we're doing. I mean, just a simple vignette. Let me see. I mean, you can see a huge difference here. I mean, it depends on where your focus is. So here's not edited. And if your focus is up here, then this works. But if you want the focus more on the arch, I mean, even just that simple little bit that we did makes a huge difference. Now my eye is contained more right here on the arch, instead of being pulled over here. And then I like to add a little bit of texture. You guys can, well, I'll zoom in so you can kind of see what it does. So just a little bit of texture. I do that instead of sharpening. Don't ask me why, I just like to look better. And then I'll do a little bit of clarity just to give it a little bit of punch. You don't want to go too extreme, right? I know when I was first learning Photoshop, probably back in high school, probably around, the year 2000. I remember like I would discover new things and I'm like, this is unbelievable. And so I'd be like, oh, look how vibrant those colors are. This is amazing. So if you ever discover something new, my advice is to do what you think looks cool and then reduce that by 50%. Or talk to somebody else. Because, we find a lot of really cool new tools and they're always coming out with new things. And we get really excited about it. And I think sometimes we're blind to what it's actually doing. So that's my advice. Do what you think looks good and then cut it back 50%. I'm just going to fix the crop just a little bit. I don't know, compositionally, this is all relative to, I don't know, I think that helps. All right, I'm going to jump to this one here, and I'm actually going to take the settings from here, and I'm going to select this other image, Option S. I'm going to sync these settings because I feel like they're pretty similar. And then notice how I have detail off as a default. Now, the reason I do that is you can do that easy. You just turn detail off and then you just hit set as default. And then that will be your new default. But the reason I do that is because if I have detail on, it will override what my adaptive ISO is doing. If you don't turn that off and you sync your settings, you're undoing what you just tried to do. So that's super important to remember. Excuse me. All right, I'm going to sync those. Yeah.
When we had a question in the chat. So when you
Yeah.
get to the next moment to answer it, the question is, what makes you want to straighten a photo or not?
That's a great question.
Like, when is Dutch tilt appropriate? What makes you cause to straighten an image? Like,
Okay,
what principles would you put?
yeah, great question. So like a Dutch tilt, what does it do? Like it adds a little bit more dynamic energy to it, where straight lines are more, firm and settled. And so I would say if it's one, intentional, and two, if it adds to the photo. If it distracts from what you're trying to communicate with the photo, then it's not the right time to do it. But if it contributes to what you're trying to communicate, I feel like that's appropriate. I feel like it's the same with black and white. I'm not somebody who just thinks that you do like a ton of black and white images just because. I feel like for me personally, the reason I would turn an image black and white is because the image demands that. Because I feel like it would be better presented black and white. Or how we talk about, what do you want people to see? Are there any elements that distract you from seeing that? And sometimes color is a distraction. and it pulls your eyes away from what you want people to see. And so is there a way to minimize or eliminate that distraction? And in some instances, turning an image black and white will do that. So you can do that through crop, you can do that through toning, you can do that through changing it to black and white. There's a lot of different ways to do that. So did that answer the question? When it's appropriate or not? Again, this is all it's all just relative. It's a personal choice. But if it doesn't contribute to it and it distracts from it, then it's probably not their best choice. And there's a great group of photographers in this organization that would be great to give feedback if you have any questions of does this help or not? Is there any other questions? Did that answer it?
I think it answered it.
Okay.
There's
All
no
right,
other questions for now.
So I synced the settings. Now I feel like the vignette in here is a little heavy. So I'm gonna take that back. First thing, I don't feel like the Dutch tilt helps here, right? But this is like almost all of my images are this way. So please know, oh, hold on, my wife's calling me. Let me text her real quick.
I think one of the things we could even maybe explore with this one, once you get back, Nate, is in the crop tools, there's the geometry settings, and we could look at maybe how we could, because this is a very wide angle kind of thing, you could see the building keystoning a little bit. We could
Yep,
see what it looks like to maybe bring those more vertical.
yep. All right. Sorry, I'm back. Okay. So we'll do that in just a little bit, what Aaron was talking about. But first I'm gonna straighten that out. I'm just gonna do it by view. You can also hit A, right? And then this one's a little bit hard to see where the horizon is, but I'll just kind of feel it out. And then honestly, again, are there any elements to add to or that distract? I feel like compositionally, this is what I want to see right here. And so I'm going to just bring that in. And I feel like that crop helps me a lot more. Because I feel like this person, oh, I still have the temperature, color temperature in there. I feel like this person, jacket over their head, looking at their phone, the rain boots on. I feel like that's more of the shot. Let's see. I might still add a little vignette. But then this up here, I feel like is a little dark. So I'm just going to get my adjustment brush and just brighten that a little bit. So even just that little bit, I mean, we didn't do much, right? But notice how our eye gets drawn to what we want people to see. And it's super subtle. There's probably a little too much clarity in there. And then optics. So by default, I think it has used profile corrections on and it will pick the lens that you have. You can also play around with distortion in the lens. Or also, Aaron, is this what you were talking about with the geometry? You're muted. Is this, I assume this is what you're talking about?
Yeah, so on the geometry, I'll use that sometimes. I'll use the far right one a lot of the times.
Yep. So you can do an auto where it will change it automatically. You can go to a like a one level horizontal, vertical, or kind of a grid. A lot of times, like Aaron was saying, I'll do the draw, like the guides that you can draw. So I want this line to be straight. And then I'm going to pick another straight line over here. And then that kind of skews it. And then I'm going to do,
Yeah, horizontals are kind of hard on this one.
yeah, this is a little bit harder, but It kind of, you get the idea though.
So explain a little bit more what that tool is actually doing between those two lines. Like what happens when you
Yeah,
draw the two lines.
so you'll find it under the crop. So if you hit C or go up to crop, you'll find it over here. Basically, I'm telling it I want this line that I drew the guide on. I want this line to be perfectly vertical and this line to be perfectly vertical. So it's fixing any kind of keystoning that's going on. And you can do that horizontally as well. So if you have a really symmetrical image with a grid pattern or whatever, you can draw all four angles and it will make it exactly symmetrical. It's just a good tool to know about, to have. All right, you guys have a preference on what other image we go to next? We got Molly the cow. We got a studio shot. Up more campus photos. Let's go. I'm gonna go to Matt's. All right, this is a super hard one. I know that I have been in situations like this multiple times where the exposure on stage is not the exposure in the crowd, but you want to show the crowd as well. So this one is super difficult. I'm gonna just straighten it a little bit. Again, I'm just gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna bring up my exposure so I can see the crowd. And I'm just gonna see how my highlights recover. So it actually does pretty well. I mean, there's enough detail in there. The one thing you don't want to do with recovering your highlights is you don't want those whites to become muddy. So you can see like right here, that area right there, there is no information in the image. It is completely blown out white. And so if you bring it down, it just kind of gets really muddy. So I'm just going to do it so it's just right there. So it's the highlight. I might bring it up a little bit more. I'm just going to bring the crop up a little bit. All right. Now this is shot. Oh, this is shot at, good job. 1000 ISO. Way to preserve your image quality there at a 40th of a second. Aaron cannot handhold at a 40th of a second. So just teasing, just giving him a
I
hard
drink
time.
too much caffeine.
Yeah.
Jitter.
So yeah, so I'm gonna see just what the denoise, the AI denoise does. I haven't really used this that much. I usually do the manual denoise, but I'm just curious. So it does a pretty good job. The problem I feel like is it takes out all of the grain. And so you can probably turn it down a little bit. Yeah. So I still want some like digital noise in there. I don't want it to look super fake.
I think this goes back to your principle. This is something brand new.
Yeah,
So do what you think is cool and then take it back 50%.
yeah. Good point. Good point. I may get my adjustment brush and just bring up shadows here, or the people in the shadows, just a little bit. People on the front row. Now you have a decision to make, right? You have this really warm tungsten setting here, this really blue setting here. I love the contrast of color. Um, but you can play around with it and see. So now this is more, you're correcting white balance over here, but then the stage gets pretty blue. Or you can go the opposite way, right? Or as I was doing this, I wonder, let's correct white balance there. I don't know if I would actually do this, but I'm just gonna play around and see. So I'm gonna hit G for gradient. So if you go up to where like your adjustment brush is, you can do a gradient. And I'm gonna drag that. Oh, where is it? Okay, and then show pins and tools. So I'm gonna drag this over. I don't want the exposure up, but I do want the color temperature.
So, hey, Nate, one of the questions from the chat is talking about discussing some of the masking features. So I think you could go a little bit more in depth here. And then on
Uh-huh.
your next image, we could do one that might use masking a lot more heavily.
Okay.
So go ahead and talk, I'd say talk a little bit deeper about some of the features in masking and how it
Okay.
works.
Great. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge masking guy in Camera Raw, but we can go through. I like doing more stuff like that in Photoshop because I feel like I don't want to say more control because you can still do a ton of stuff in Camera Raw. I feel like I have easier control and in Photoshop. But yeah, we can go over that too. So I just turned the color temperature a little bit. I'm gonna have that fade a little bit quicker. See, and I don't know if I like that as much, but you're kind of trying to what's the word I'm looking for? You guys know what I'm saying. I'm trying to make the color balance the same throughout. And you could do another gradient and warm that up as well. But I kind of like I kind of like the warm and cool. So again, it's personal preference, whatever you think works. Effects, I'm gonna bring clarity up a little bit just to have things pop, the texture up. Maybe vignette just slightly. So there's the original, and then there's the other, so you can just see the audience a little bit more. Again, there's nothing like super fancy about what we're doing. It's really easy, basic stuff, but makes a huge, huge difference. All right, should we go over masking stuff here? So we
Go
got
ahead.
a nice, oh, go ahead.
Let me go ahead and read what some of the stuff that's happened. With
Okay.
the auto masking tools, I'm curious if you have also noticed a big difference in the feathering quality between select subject versus select people. I'm finding that select people is often very good, except for the feathering. Very hard edge, almost no feathering. Select subject often spills over to more than just the person, but has a higher quality feathered edge to it. Both seem useful in certain situations, but each often requires manual refining.
Yeah. I think so. This is that question or comment, whoever it's from, it sounds like you have a lot more experience in using the masking in Brit or in Camera Raw than I do. Because I don't use it that much in Camera Raw. Because you do have to still refine your edges a lot. Again depends on what you're doing and how detailed you need to be. And I still feel like personally, I like to have more easier control in Photoshop than Camera Raw. Maybe that's just me for being lazy and not playing around with it more. Um, but like what they're kind of talking about, well, I'm just going to do basic toning and then we'll get into like the subject select or the people select. So I'm going to add contrast. I'm going to bring my exposure up a little bit, highlights down. Color, I'm going to bring that down a little bit. Just to brighten her up a little bit more up there so they're more even. And again, you can do this in your masking as well. You turn on your highlight flipping alert. So that's showing wherever is red is pure white right now, right? Or wherever is blue is going to be pure black. So you can turn those on and off. Something like this, again, you don't want to see all of the studio. So there's two things you can do. One, if you just crop and you can bring it in this way, then you just get rid of that. and then we can get rid of all the other stuff later. That's a really easy way to do it. Or this would be something that we could probably take into Photoshop. And if you want to keep it big and horizontal and you want something that a designer can just plug and play, maybe that's what we'll do. All right, so let's go up to create a new mask, and then we'll just do the select subject, select people. We'll do the people, and we'll pick both people. We'll see. So it has person 1, it shows the mask on her, person 2, and you'll see it's not perfect. Like, look at his hand down here. So it gets his hand and her leg, and then part of his hand and arm, and then missing a leg. So, I mean, it's obviously not perfect. So you're going to have to refine, or you just do all people. So we'll do that. You can
I'd say
pick.
in
Oh,
this
go
case,
ahead.
there's like multiple ways to skin a cat because they have different features. Like you could even do a luminance value to where, because the background's pretty white, or a color value. Like let's say if
Yeah.
you're doing like a green screen, you can even do like a green screen selection in Camera RAW. But it all depends on like what the image presents and what's available. Like where this is on a clean white background, there's a chance you could select the white background and invert it kind of stuff.
Yep.
So if one way doesn't work well, there's always another way to try.
Yep. Absolutely. Again, this is just like Aaron was saying, this is just one way. And then you can see, like, it's not completely perfect. You have hair here, so there's some of the white background that's not masked out back here. So you can add a mask. Let's see. So you can subtract, add, and I'm just going to do like an adjustment brush. I'm not going to go into detail and do this, but you can see how you can just go and kind of refine your mask, right? I'm not going to take a lot of time to do that, but you can go through and manually refine your mask. You have all of your sliders over here for your size, your flow, your density, the feather. You always want your feather to match the hardness of the line that you're working on, right? You don't want, like right now, it's a super soft feather. You don't want that for a harder line. So you want to go over and kind of match your feather to what's going on. But so we're going to select that mask, and then we're going to invert it. And then let's say we just want to blow out the background to pure white. So now that you've inverted that mask, so now that whole background, except for up here, right, is pure white.
I used to work with a photographer who would go in and put multiple in, and he would just keep upping the exposure to everything in the background blown out white, even like the other parts of the studio. So he would try to do it on camera raw instead of using Photoshop,
Yep.
and it worked for him.
Yep. And we'll maybe, I don't know, if we have time, we can open this up in Camera, I mean in Photoshop. Basically, what I would do in Photoshop is, well, I'll just, what time are we at? Yeah, we probably won't do it. So I would open this image up in Photoshop. I would get a lasso tool and I would select around them. I would invert that selection and I would fill it completely white. And then I would go in manually with my dodge tool and I would put it on highlight. And then I'm going to go in super close. And because it's on highlight, it's not going to affect like your shadows or anything as much. And I'm just going to brush in where the rest of the backdrop is, where it's not pure white. And then I have a lot more control. Use it, and I'll use a curves layer to darken it so I can actually see what's white and what's not. Because there's a lot of times that things will be hidden when you're working with like something high key or low key. I'll use a throwaway curves layer just to reveal what I'm actually doing. Hope that makes sense.
Nate, we
Yeah.
have another question in the chat. It says, can you talk about when to apply sharpening in Camera Raw?
Whenever you want to. Again, I don't know. It's so sharpening is one of those things that it's a creative decision, right? And I wish I knew all the differences between like what sharpening does versus your texture versus like your clarity. They all have different looks. Sharpening, from what I understand, is it's just finding contrast in pixels and increasing that contrast. Now you can do masking, right? So if you want to sharpen that much, you can mask it. If you hold down Option, you can see where you're applying that sharpening. You just drag that slider back and forth. So now I'm just doing the outlines, right? So maybe his forehead isn't as much, but around the hairline and stuff, that's a lot more sharp.
Nate, can you talk about how you got that mask to show?
How I got what?
Yeah, how you showed the black and white masking.
Yeah. So if you hold down the Option key and click on that masking slider, it will show you. The Option key is kind of like a hidden gem. You know, you can click on that on a lot of different things. So even if you go to light, you click on black and you do the slider here, it will show you what's black and what's not. So whatever's black in the image will be black when you let go. Or with your whites, right? Same thing. So don't be afraid to like click around with your Option key and see what happens.
One of the things that I've heard personally when it comes to sharpening, I've noticed this on Capture One, and now believe Camera Raw has it where you can add sharpening as you're exporting for different versions. And I've never done this myself, but I've heard that if the image is going to be viewed smaller, that there should be more sharpening compared to when it's going to be blown up in large. Less sharpening is needed as far as like viewing distances and sizes. Do you have any input on that?
I think what you said was great.
Or opinion? Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, guys. Like, I really don't know what I'm doing here. I just make this stuff up.
Like I feel like a lot of times we don't know where our images are going to be end up in the finale of all things. Like usually a designer or some social media person gets them. We
Yeah.
don't necessarily know if they're gonna. You walk across campus and all of a sudden you see your image blown up big, and you're like, "Oh, I did not know that was gonna happen."
Yeah. I wish that I would have known. I would have done a different edit on it. All right, Molly the cow. My eye kind of wanders a little bit. So, I mean, I'm just going to go through my default. I'm going to bring my highlights, my shadows up a little. Um, I don't know. I feel like color's good. Little clarity, little texture, slight vignette. Change composition just a little. Um, Maybe bring up my vibrance just slightly. We'll do an adjustment brush on Molly, just a little bit on her face, a little dark over here. I'll bring that up a little bit. If you hit K again, it will do a new adjustment brush layer. So you can keep just hitting K and stack those. But I feel like over here is a little bit brighter and I want to bring that down. So I'm just going to bring my overall exposure down a little, not too much. And then bring, because these cows are a lot darker over here. I'm just going to brighten that up. So even just that, like 2 seconds, right? 2 seconds of editing. Here, where does your eye go? Like, I want to go here because this is where the focus is, but your eye will mostly go to the brightest part of the image or the area of most contrast. So I want to look here, and I know that's where our eye is supposed to go, but this area over here to the right just keeps tugging at my eye and pulling it over. And so just by doing like those super minimal changes, now your eye can like rest right here, and it doesn't feel like it's getting your eyes getting pulled over. There's no battle. And I mean, it's really subtle. If I were to do anything, I'd probably darken this cow a little bit more so we can't see him like picking his nose with his tongue, right? Because that's a little bit distracting. But just like those minor things that took like 2 seconds, it just makes a huge, huge difference in directing people to see what you want them to see.
Nate, we had a request for the trophy shot if you think you have enough time.
The trophy shot. Okay. Oh, because it's backlit and everybody loves things that are backlit. All right, I'm gonna go over something again really fast. I gotta remember where it is. Is it in effects? No. Oh wait, hold on. I don't know if you guys have seen the lens blur. I actually don't use it, but it is pretty cool. Basically, it is like your portrait mode on your iPhone. And you can turn on like the visual depth, and it's showing you the artificial depth that it's creating in your image and what gets affected. So, you know, you can turn your blur amount up a ton, and then you can shift that focus. So if we want it to be on the cow licking its or picking its nose, we can do that or slide that depth over more. Or we can slide it down more. I mean, it's pretty cool what it can do.
And Nate, are you holding down the option key to see that?
No, so I
Or
just
what?
clicked this visual depth box right here
Okay.
to turn that on and off. And then you can drag the range of your depth of field here. So you can have it like it, you know, F1 or something if you want. Like you can make it super, super shallow. Again, it's not perfect. You can refine edges. You can change the shape of your bokeh. There's all sorts of stuff you can do, but fun to play around. Good to know it's there. But again, it's like your iPhone, right? It's not perfect in the way that it masks and everything else. All right, really fast. So I'm just going to change my crop, get rid of the light that's kind of distracting. And this is one where we can, let's try the geometry. All right, so I'm going to find a straight line up top. I'm going to follow this straight line down here on the bricks. I'm going to go on this pillar and then this pillar. And then that just straightens it out, makes it more symmetrical. Center them up a little bit. And I'm saying when stuff's backlit like this, I'm just going to embrace it. Like I like it. You're more concerned about the exposure on your subject than you are about the background. So I'm gonna bring that up a little bit. You can bring your highlights down. Might actually bring that down even further. Maybe bring vibrance up a little bit. And I'm sure you guys probably know this too, but you also have your color mixer, your hue, saturation, luminance. So you can take, like, let's say the yellows, right? We want to change those to green or to orange, whatever. Like it'll select those. You can hit this little, there it is, hue targeted adjustment tool. Click this little guy, and let's say I don't like the color of that suit. So it will automatically target the color that you're selecting. Or if you don't want, if you want it desaturated, like I don't like that gold, just click it and desaturate it. Or you want it more saturated. So there's some pretty cool tools. I mean, your luminance, that just brings it up or down, right, in value. Or you can individually pick, let's say like for us, for example, right, we want blues to be seen more than purple. So I'll drag my purple slider over to be blue. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty subtle change, like in the suit coat. But I'll drag that over to err on blue more than I would purple. So that's basically what I would do there.
Nate, there was a question.
Uh-huh.
Is there anything that you can do to control the flare or mitigate the flare from the windows?
I'm sure there is, but I don't know. Let's see. Let's go dehaze. I don't know if that'll work. Not really.
I wonder if you could like manually dehaze like with a small brush, like a mask brush or something like that.
Yeah, or if you don't bring your exposure up as much. Like for me, again, this is all personal preference. For me, I love that it's kind of blown out and the light coming from behind makes it a really nice high key image. But how to minimize that, you could drop your exposure down a little bit,
You could probably
select subject. Oh, go ahead.
make like this is not Photoshop, but underexpose in camera maybe. I'm not sure if that would be a
Yeah,
solution, and then bring back your shadows in your edit.
yep, you could definitely do that. So for example, like this image here, this is how I would probably shoot this image where it is underexposed, but I'm underexposing it. I don't know whose image this is, but I would underexpose it so I have detail in my sky more. Oh, whoops, wrong button. Because I know I can bring my exposure up and then bring my highlights back down. And that information's still there. If that information's not there, then you can't recover it. But if it's there and you're watching your histogram when you're shooting on the back of your camera and you see, okay, I don't have any shadows that are clipped and I don't have any highlights that are clipped, I have information there that I can work with. And so then you can adjust like with your shadows and your highlights and really get a good dynamic range out of the image that you're trying to get.
So Nate, we're about out of time. If you want
All
to
right.
give any closing remarks or a funny
Closing
thing.
remarks. Okay, again, I just want to reemphasize one, I am not the authority on editing photos, but I feel like I don't know, hopefully these are some tips that will help, or even just the visual psychology of it is so important to like when you take your picture, your work is not done. And again, this is just philosophy of Nate, but your work is not done. Part of the photo is to guide people, direct them to see what you want them to see without recognizing that you are guiding and directing them to do that very thing. And it doesn't take a lot. I mean, you can do just minor adjustments that will really help guide the viewer to look at what you want them to see, eliminate distractions, whatever that is, and uh, and let the viewer be able to rest their eyes in the image a lot more naturally. Um, and there's a million ways to do everything that we just talked about. So go explore, have fun. Hopefully this was helpful, and thanks.